Hi, everybody. Charles from GMATNinja and GMAT Club here. Welcome to our International MBA Day. Really special guest here, an international MBA himself, who works in the bowels of the organization, works at GMAC. We're going to talk about the GMAT Focus Edition, answer all of your questions. We've got half an hour here. So if you're watching this live, please ask your questions. This is your chance. You've got a guy who works in the belly of the beast, knows most of what there is to know about the GMAT Focus and why we're doing it. Shikhar Gupta, originally from India, came to the US to do an MBA, now works as the marketing manager over at GMAC. Shikhar, thank you so much for doing this with us.
Thank you, Charles, for having me.
All right, where I'd like to start today is let's get through some of the general questions. Tell us about this GMAT Focus thing. When is it available? Why is it available? Why did you guys make the switch?
So I think something that I do want to address before we start this whole conversation is I believe there's a lot of fear going around about this new exam, but something I do want to reiterate, and we have said this multiple times as well, is GMAT Focus Edition is just an updated version of GMAT. And this is nothing new. We have had updates over from the last 70 years when the GMAT first launched. And I'm not sure if you know the exact history, but when it first launched, it was on paper. So it wasn't even on a computer. Then we went on a computer, then we added integrated reasoning. So there have been multiple um, iterations of the exam to make sure that we are meeting the evolving needs of the market. And Focus Edition is the same. We are making sure we are still the leaders in the graduate management education space. We are making sure that we are meeting the expectations of a candidate, of schools, even of employers. So Focus Edition is just the updated version of the current GMAT. And so, and I think you also asked, why do we have both the exams? Or am I?
Yeah, so tell us why. So this particular set of changes. So absolutely. So over 70 plus years of the GMAT, there have been, I actually counted once because I'm a nerd like that, and I can't remember the number. I mean, 8 to 10, maybe 12 different rounds of changes where data sufficiency hasn't been there since the beginning. Sentence correction has come, now it's about to go. It's an exam that's constantly evolving in response to stakeholders. But I guess what was it that really drove these changes now? What was it that inspired it? How did you guys go about researching what to do and how to make this a better version of the test?
So just a little bit of background here, Charles. I think a lot of, especially from the candidates side, I have been that person as well. Like when I was preparing for my applications to get into a business school, I just knew about GMAT. I didn't know much about what GMAC is. Like if someone said GMAC, I would always hear, "Oh, you mean GMAT, math with a T," right? So I think just a little bit of history here is so GMAC is a non-profit organization that has over several years, several decades worked with member schools, and really over this period of time, we are constantly listening, we are constantly having focus groups, we are having our research studies that we also do a lot of industry research. So with all these information and the partnerships and the relationships we have with the school, we are constantly listening on how we can develop and make sure our assessment portfolio is up to date. So by that so we just don't work with schools, right? So how this GMAT focus came into place was uh, we were working with schools, we were working with employers, candidates to make sure that our assessment was up to date. So something that we did started to get was the market is evolving. So there are some things that we may have to change a bit. So we launched a very comprehensive and how do I say a very uh, a very in-depth research, making sure that we had schools globally. We had over 65 schools, I believe, which represented a good set of different programs, different demographics, different locations. So having all those schools, making sure that we have input from all of them, uh, collected that data, then worked with over 5,400 candidates, I believe, more than that, to make sure that the current exam, what we are developing, is again meeting today's needs. We are able to still be the leaders in in the graduate management education space, right? So, and then on top of that, we also had a global advisory group, which again like comprised of schools that made sure that the input that we were getting, what else was needed, we put that all together, came up with this exam which was more efficient, flexible, and insightful. And again, like it's the candidate that is taking it, but we also want to make sure the readiness of that candidate is translated back to the school. So nothing happened in isolation. We didn't just like wake up one day and we were like, you know what, we should just come up with a new updated version. It didn't happen like that. So like a lot of thought, a lot of, I'm sure like Charles, you have attended a lot of sessions with our like our training sessions as well. So
Absolutely.
you know the thought that has like gone behind, the thought that's behind it,
Yep.
all of the research that has gone that is supported for this update.
Yep.
So yeah, that's how we really came up with this focus edition.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And I'm going to start feeding in some of the questions from viewers. If you're watching us live, and I can see the audience increasing as we go along, which is really nice, please pop your questions. And I'm not going to answer specific questions around how to prep for the test. That's not what this is for. But we've got somebody at GMAC to tell us what are you guys thinking? What's going on with this test? What's on there? What's not on there? So I'm going to limit the questions to things that Shikhar is an expert on here as best I can. One thing that I just want to emphasize that you said. So GMAC is a nonprofit organization. And one of the things that happens all the time is I hear test takers saying, oh, GMAC's doing this, this, and this so they can make more money. Very, very briefly, and then we'll get into some more GMAT specific or GMAT focus specific questions. Who runs the organization? I guess who does it? What's the mission? What's the purpose of the organization? If it's not to make profit, what is the mission really? What are you out to do in general? And then we can get more into the test, since that's what I think people are waiting for.
That's actually a great question, Charles. I think I have to go back to my interview process where I really studied the mission. I'm just kidding. So the mission is to really, so it's very simple, making sure the talent never goes undiscovered. By that, what I mean is
Love that.
the talent is on both sides. There's candidate and then there's schools, right? So it's not, a candidate also has to make sure that he's connected to the right program and the right school that fits their needs, right? So we make sure we bridge that gap. So it's really bringing candidates and schools together so that talent never goes undiscovered. Oh, there I said it.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, super briefly, let's talk about the GMAT focus. Take us through just the highlights of what's different, what's new. What are you guys excited about internally that you think is better about the GMAT focus, particularly from a test taker standpoint?
From a test taker standpoint, something that I personally, because I've been through that journey, Charles, something uh, because I was in those shoes, I'm sure the audience here, I can resonate with them because not so long ago I was in the same shoes. I was prepping for my MBA applications, was trying to figure out test if I should take a test, if I shouldn't take a test, what should I do, what materials do I need, and I did do some extensive research even back then. So about focus, like what has changed this time is that I personally believe, because I've been through that journey, is it's very candidate focused, because in the end it's the candidate that is taking the exam, right? So just talking from the test taker's perspective, I think it is very candidate focused in the sense it's more efficient, it's more flexible, and it's more insightful. So when I say efficient, it's while we were researching about this the new updated exam, we wanted to make sure that the candidate experience and the candidate readiness for the MBA program is fits today's market. So we have a shorter attention span, right? So we thought people don't want to sit for uh, 3 hours now. They're like, you know what, I just want to get done with it. I don't want to prepare for that long. So we had like all these input from the research that we had. So we made sure that this time the exam was much shorter. Candidates had more time to answer each question, and the skills that we were assessing, which the top 3 skills, and I think I'm going to bring this up throughout the webinar. We wanted to make sure the problem solving skills are being assessed, critical reasoning is being assessed, and data literacy. So all these 3 skills, and since I've also gone through that MBA program, I can tell you that these skills are very important in your program and outside of your program. I'm sure like everyone's a working professional right now, they can probably resonate, but that's the base of anything that we do in today's time. So these are the skills that really help you understand if you will be able to fit into the program or not, the program that you're applying to. On the school side, they are able to assess if the candidate can fit in the class profile that they offer, right? So I think it works both ways. There are like small changes that we have had that I think are relevant to the candidate. Firstly, since the exam is shorter, the prep time is also going to be shorter. So previously, we used to offer a 8-week study planner for candidates who like to have like a timetable. I used to. So because like I was working, I wanted a timetable so I can make sure I can follow a structured approach, right? So like for the current GMAT, we have an 8-week planner. But for the Focus Edition, we recommend a 6-week planner. Again, like this is not something you have to go by, but if you need a start, this is something that is available on our website, mba.com as well, at no charge. So you can like that, you can take that as a starting point. So the exam is shorter, the prep time is shorter, right? Then we wanted to make sure that even when we are reducing the time for the exam, the candidates had slightly more time to answer each question. So if I were to explain it in comparison to the current exam, I would say, let's say you take the current approach of the, if you take the approach of current GMAT and put that for GMAT Focus Edition, you would still have time left to probably like go back, review your answers or whatever you want to do. So you basically get more time per question, and which is like needed in today's time. I know I used to like be like, you know what, I need to answer this set of question in less than a minute, so I have more time for certain types of questions. So wanted to make sure that was being addressed, right? And just more insights, like I said, more insights for the candidate. Now we have 3 sections. So I don't know if you want, I can get into the whole structure of the exam, or I can cut it short. However you want me to proceed.
I think I'm seeing enough questions from viewers right now that let's maybe start focusing on those since we only have about half an hour here. So because I think it's easy enough to go on, obviously, the mba.com, go look up the structure of the exam. Plenty of videos here on GMAT Club already where we go through it. Plenty of prep advice already out there, even though GMAT Focus doesn't launch until November 7th. So we still have about 3 weeks here. Plenty that's out there. Some really simple questions coming out that I'm not sure are getting the attention yet. Very simple one here. Will GMAT Focus be accepted by all business schools?
Oh, yeah, of course. So again, like I think there's a fear of, should I take the GMAT Focus or should I just take the current GMAT, right? One thing that, from a test taker's perspective, one thing that I would recommend that candidates know is that in the end, it is still GMAT, right? So it is still a part of your application, still helps you stand out. And I would just focus on that. So yes, to answer the question, GMAT Focus is accepted by all the schools, and our market development team on the back end is working closely with the schools. We are we have like recurring training sessions with schools, broadly, more specifically. So because we have those relationships with the school, we are making sure that the schools understand the GMAT Focus, the new changes, as much like how we are explaining it to the candidates, right? We are doing the same thing for the schools. So they're better prepared once the score comes in for GMAT Focus Edition. They're able to evaluate what the current GMAT score is, what the Focus Edition score is. So all of those things we are working relentlessly. Our team, market development team, is working relentlessly to make sure the schools are equipped with that knowledge. And yes, they are accepting GMAT Focus.
And I think the only exception here, Tanisha, thank you so much for the question, is there are some schools that are not taking it for round 1 and round 2 this year, partly because obviously not available for round 1 unless the school has really unusual deadlines. That's the only exception. But in general, remember, one of the things we forget as a community, GMAC is not a for-profit organization trying to sell us stuff. It's a nonprofit member association trying to help business schools match with candidates. So business schools have played a huge role in developing this test. So they want to take it. Related question, Shikhar, you already kind of started bringing this up a little bit.
That's fine. I've been in those shoes, Charles. I don't, even if the questions are recurring, like I used to be the one, like the question is being addressed, but I have the same question again. So it's totally fine.
No, that's part of why we brought you here, is what it feels like. You've been
Yeah.
here, you've been a GMAT club member long before you went to work for GMAC. But let's get into this issue more, because this is where I'm seeing a lot of the questions from viewers right now. This is what we're seeing tons of on the GMAT club forum, on YouTube comments. We have these two score skills. They look very, very similar. One ends in 5 on the GMAT Focus Edition, obviously multiples of 10 for the classic old GMAT. But the percentiles are different. It's harder to get something that starts with a 7 on the GMAT Focus Edition than it was on the old GMAT. So this is the kind of question we're getting lots of. And again, as always, apologies for mispronunciations. Anusmita, thank you so much for this. I think this is a really good way of putting it. Schools, you would think if schools, evaluators, employers for that matter, random people off the street are looking at 2 GMAT scores. One is, let's say, a 655, one is a 700. Obviously, those are from 2 different versions of the exam, but those are equivalent percentiles. And you just kind of go, well, wow, that 700 must be a lot better than that 655. So I guess one of the biggest questions we're getting from the community right now is, what's GMAC doing to help educate schools? What should we expect schools to do, especially over the next 5 years, where current GMAT scores are valid for 5 years? If you take the classic GMAT today, still valid 5 years from now. So we know that we're going to have admissions committees sitting there looking at an applicant pool with a mix of GMAT Focus and old GMAT scores. What should we expect them to do? Are they using a concordance table of some sort to try to convert the scores? Are they being expected to use percentiles? So I guess, what do you expect them to do, and what kind of efforts have you had so far to educate them?
That's a great question, Charles. So something I do want the test takers to know again is we are working very closely with the schools to make sure they understand the differences between focus and the current GMAT. So as a candidate, let's say you send out a score. Let's say, Charles, you have taken the current GMAT, right? And I have taken the Focus Edition. So let's say we both send out our scores to a school XYZ. So when they receive your score and when they receive mine, they're going to see you have taken the current GMAT and I have taken the Focus Edition. So since our team has made sure that I'm trained, the admissions team is trained enough to look at both the scores and not make any sort of bias as to like you mentioned, right? You scored like 700, I scored 655 in the Focus Edition. You scored 700 in the current GMAT. So the school's going to look at it and they'll be like, oh yeah, 700 is pretty much the same as is more than 655, right? But that's not the case. The concordance table that you mentioned, we have that information out for both schools and candidates. What we have done with this new update is that we have tried shifting the focus so much from the score to the percentile. Because what has happened over the years, Charles, is that we have had a certain shift in the score ranges. And why is that? Is because the exam has only attracted more diverse population, has like become more global. So there was a shift, and then the distribution, the bell curve that we call it, was shifting on on a different side, right? So we wanted to reset that as well. So Focus Edition addresses that problem. We want to make sure the candidate pool is being represented more efficiently with the current test taking population that we have. So to go back to your original question, so how does a 700 in current GMAT compare to a 655, right? So we have, if we go by the concordance table that we have made public, it's no secret, honestly. Like, we are not holding this information, or we are not just sharing this information back with the schools. So this information is all out there for the candidates and for the schools and even for the test prep organizations. So if you look at the 700 and 655 comparison, you would see that in percentile, it's around, I think, 89 or 90 percentile. I think it's 89.3 or something. So this is what we would want to focus on, even as a test taker and even as a school professional that is that is basically reviewing your application. So the school professional knows the difference between two and knows that they have to go off by the percentile ranking. So I, as a candidate, would not focus much on, oh my God, I have to like have a 705 in the Focus Edition to match 700 in the current GMAT. That's not the case. What I would do is go to the concordance table, look at what 700 score meant as a percentile, and then aim for that. And again, like not everyone's aiming for a 700, not everyone's aiming for a 650.
Mhm.
So everyone has a different score rate. So we are trying to shift the focus from the score to the percentile. And if it helps, like as a candidate, I would just focus on the percentile because the school facing professionals are also focusing on the percentile to compare scores.
Perfect. And Eduardo, thank you for this, and good to see you here for the Eduardo I think you are that I've seen before on some of these. Just to underscore, I know this got answered in the chat. Concordance tables are available to students. This is all up on the MBA.com website, free for everybody to see, detailed percentile charts, so not a mystery. So Shikhar, bottom line, it sounds like the way we should all be thinking about this period that's going to feel chaotic to us all, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where there's two different versions of the GMAT available, is everyone's going to be focused on percentiles. Schools are going to evaluate you based on the percentiles. And in doing so, that's going to let them compare apples to apples, even though the tests are on slightly different scales now. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's fair to assume, Charles. But also something that we do have to remember is that to make sure that these changes that we were making in the exam, we had to differentiate it somehow. So that is why we didn't like choose a completely new scale where we were like, you know what, the score is going to be uh, 200 to 500 now. So we didn't do that. We wanted to make sure that it is similar to what we had before, but also this changes because there are more sections included now. So again, like that information all is available at for candidates for schools, so you can dive deeper as depending on what your goals are. Like I said, again, not everyone's aiming for a 700, not everyone's aiming for a 800. So whatever you are aiming for, go for the percentile ranking. And if you are thinking about Focus Edition, then I would compare those percentile ranking, and then I would just aim accordingly for Focus Edition.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Getting a question about percentiles, and thank you for the kind words, mysterious LinkedIn user. Are the new percentiles versus scores expected to vary much as time progresses? So you were mentioning that one of the things that's happened over the years on the classic GMAT, on the old version of the GMAT, is that because the testing pool changed, percentiles changed, particularly on quant. How much have you discussed internally what's the expectation kind of over the longer haul of the next 5 or 10 years? Do you expect these percentiles to adjust as more people take the GMAT focus, or is the expectation that they're going to stay stable?
Uh, I may not be the best expert to answer that question, Charles, because it's more technical than we would think. But to just give you an overview, the percentile ranking changes, right? But as a candidate, once I get my score, let's say like I've appeared for the exam today. So what I get my score for today, I get my percentile for today. So if that is set as for, and this is just like for example, again, like I'm not the best expert in this, but just as from a test taker's mindset, when I get my score, I get a 705 and I get like let's say 95 percentile. 10 years from now, your score wouldn't be valid after 10 years. So let's say like 4 years from now, it's not 95 percentile, it's 93 percentile. But in my original score report, it reflects 95 percentile. So you know what I mean? Like when I appeared, I was still among the top 95, top 5%, sorry. So I would focus on that. That's why we have been trying to shift the focus from this whole score range to the percentile. And like I would hope that if you take the exam today, you're not reappearing in like 15, 20 years from now. But if you are, like, again, things are going to change and we don't know, like we may have more days in GMAT exam by then. So we really can't say anything what's going to happen in the next 10 years. We're going to keep innovating. That's what we do. We want to make sure we are ahead or at par with the market trends. So yeah, I wouldn't worry about what will happen down the line. I would just worry about where I stand today, and that's going to reflect in my report.
That's perfect. Thank you so much. One thing I'll add in there is that we have seen changes in percentiles over the years. They tend to evolve pretty slowly. So it's unlikely that for any individual test taker or any individual applicant, that it's going to have a huge impact on your odds of admission one way or the other. We have less than 5 minutes left because we need to vacate this room. So apologies. I'm not going to get to anywhere. I'm going to barely scratch the surface of all the user questions. If you guys are enjoying this, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit us up in the comments. We'll bring Shikhar back as much as you want. If you want to have more Q&As with him, if he'll let us. Because again, guys, he's one of you. Like, he has been through this. It was just, what, 4 years ago, Shikhar, that you were taking the
Yeah,
GMAT?
around 4, 5. I think my first attempt was 5 years ago, but I did multiple.
So he knows what it's like to be in your shoes. So if
Yep.
you want us to bring him on again, hit us up in the comments afterwards, and we'll do our best. I think this is one thing worth addressing with our last few minutes here, because we're getting a lot of questions on this. How does reviewing and changing the answers to 3 questions affect the score, assuming that 3 changes were made to correct answer to make the incorrect choices correct now? So assuming that you use those 3 changes, good things happened. You had 3 wrong answers earlier. Now they're right. Adaptive test, right? So what we've always been told about the GMAT or question level adaptive tests is that, hey, your performance on all of the preceding questions affects the difficulty. So how is this possible that we can answer 20, 21, 23 questions on a section and then change them? How does that work?
So again, like, just thinking from a test taker's perspective, right? I think like there's this thing where we constantly focus on getting answers right, and then adapting to like a much more difficult question that we had previously answered, right? So that's the adaptiveness of the test, which is fine. I get that, but again, like, the score changing, it will still happen, because let's say you are changing something from incorrect to correct. You have to know that the difficulty was already set. All you're doing is changing an incorrect answer to correct, and you will get points for that. So I wouldn't worry too much about like how changing would affect my answers. And to be very honest, we have this feature, but like, once you're in that exam, you always make sure you get the answer correct by then, unless you're trying to save time. That could be one of the strategies, but I know it depends from candidate to candidate. But again, like, the how you answer the questions only sets the adaptability of the test. Getting something from incorrect to correct is only going to help your score.
So
I hope I answered that question correctly.
yeah, I mean, that sounded good to me, Shikhar. Just to summarize, obviously the difficulty level of the questions you see is still determined by that first pass through the section. Let's say it's data insights, 20 questions. The difficulty level of those last few questions, for example, is going to be determined by your entire performance up to that point. So then, yes, you can go change 3 answers. The difficulty obviously doesn't change based on that, but your score is going to improve if you change 3 answers from wrong to right. And one of the things I've heard some of the psychometricians say at GMAC is that, why the number 3? Well, first of all, any more than that, and it's going to start making people's heads explode. And second, it's a number that's reasonable. So if you'd made those 3 correct answers on your first pass through, yeah, the questions would be a little bit more difficult, but the difference wouldn't be that radical, is what I've been told so far. Does that sound right, Shikhar?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, and it's before you submit that whole section. So again, like, your score is determined, you change the answers, and then you get the score.
Perfect. Okay, we have an awkward 30 seconds left. Any final words, Shikhar? Any advice for somebody who's trying to decide which test to take? Lots of choices now. There's test waivers, there's TEPS optional, there's GRE, there's short GRE, there's EA, there's all sorts of things. How should people think about all this?
I would just recommend taking the exam that's more relevant to the graduate business school, and GMAT is the clear choice for that, because it is the leading assessment that has been used for over 70 years. Still the golden standard when it comes to assessment. So I would pick that, and again, like, it shows your readiness for a business school.
Perfect. Shikhar, thank you so much for doing this with us. Again, thank you for everybody who joined us live. If you have more questions, sorry to keep this so short today. Go enjoy the rest of International MBA Day. But if you have more questions, please hit us up in the comments. If you want to see us bring on Shikhar or somebody else from GMAC again, obviously thrilled to do if there's more questions for him. All right. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Shikhar,
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.